Good morning, 8:30, March 24th, and this is the public meeting regarding potential taxes, property tax levy. I'll start the meeting by asking for a motion to approve the agenda. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Campbell, second by Carr to approve the agenda. And we'll open the public hearing. I think we'll start by having our county assessor come up and explain this piece of mail that you got in this letter you got in the mail here a few weeks ago. So Brandy, would you do the honors, please?
So for those in the room that don't know me, I'm Brandy Schmidt, the Floyd County Assessor.
We can't hear.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
You can turn around and adjust him, Brandy.
So for anyone, I'm Brandy Schmidt, Floyd County Assessor. So for anyone that listened to the supervisors meeting last week, I kind of barged in the middle of the meeting when they were talking about the form that was mailed out to you. I'm sure everyone received it. It kind of is supposed to give you a picture of what your taxes would change based on different valuations for commercial residential for the city, school, and county. They were talking about it in the meeting, and they were talking about how the form for most of you for the county showed an increase of like 12%, whether you're rural or urban. I had just been to a conference where our assessor's affiliate had pointed out that the math on the form had some flaws. So I interrupted the Board of Supervisors to mention that to them. And then I spoke with Dennis earlier in the week, or later in the week last week, and he asked me to kind of put that together a little bit more clearly than what I did when I entered into the meeting. I had called in from out of town, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the form looked like, but the front of the form is very accurate based on what was given to the county auditor from the Board of Supervisors, your city, and your schools. So that there basically shows what the current property taxes that are being levied are for each of those things, the current tax rate, which is what we'd also call the levy rate, which is the number of dollars per thousand of the taxable value that you pay. And then also the proposed tax amount and the proposed tax rate. All of that is accurate based on the max levy amount that those taxing authorities had calculated and given to the auditor for the mailing. I will also say the auditor has no control over this mailing. It's created out of legislation. And so while we disagree with a lot of the way it's presented, it is what it is. The whole state looks the same. When you look at the back of the form, it takes each of those entities, the school, county, and city, and it says what their current tax rate is if you had $100,000 of assessed value for residential or $300,000 of assessed value for commercial, and it shows you what the tax dollars would be on that $100,000, and then also the percent and change. And that's where the flaw in the formula is. So how they calculated the change between the current year's taxes and the proposed taxes is they assumed a 10% increase in your assessed value for this calculation. The issue with that is that the Iowa law only allows assessors to increase the value of a property based on the market in the odd numbered years. So the Board of Supervisors, the cities, and the schools are calculating their property taxes based on the 2024 assessments. So because that's an even number year, unless you change something on your property, you built a building, you took it down or something like that, there was a condition change, you're not going to see a change in your assessed value for your 24 valuation, and you're not going to see an increase in your assessment because of that. So the flaw in this formula is that when they compared 100 to 110,000 and 300 to 330,000 for commercial, that would not be the most accurate way for most people to do it. They should have used $100,000 and the $300,000 both times. So I did use those calculations and double check the math. And when I calculated it out for $100,000 property, I only did the county because that's what we were talking about. But the change in that value is actually in like single digits. It's 1.75%, 1.72% for rural, and 2.06 for urban. So the 12.59 and the 12.28 are grossly inaccurate for most people. Obviously, if you did new construction or you made improvements to your property, your assessed value is going to increase based on those improvements. If you had a deterioration or change in condition to lower it, obviously you're going the right way. It will be even lower yet. Another thing I wanted to point out is that April 1st is the deadline for assessors to mail out assessment notices. So the assessment notice that you're gonna receive in the mail, around April 1st, we're mailing them on the 28th, is going to show your 2025 assessments. So yes, you're gonna see an increase on that assessment because it's 2025, so we do market adjustments based on our sales ratio. And I'd be happy to go into that in more detail in another time if anyone would like. But you should not confuse what is going on today and what is going on in your forms that you were sent and the levy rates that they're doing with what your assessed value is that you get on that form for 2025. In 2025, if our property tax system stays the way it is, there will be assessment limitation changes that will probably eat up most of that gain in assessed value. And then also they will propose new levy rates at that point. That will be a year from now. The other thing is that there's legislation proposed that would completely change our property tax system. And if those things happen, we don't know what that would be, but the legislator's intent is to reduce your property taxes. So there's a lot of things up in the air, but mostly do not confuse your assessment notice that you get next week with what is happening here today, because it is a completely different value. And if you don't know what your assessed value is for 2024, most of you can look at your property tax statement from your 23, the taxes that you had to pay again this month, and that'll give you your value. If you did make changes to your property, you can go on our website or I can provide that for you. But for the most part, they're lower than what they would be for 25.
So does anyone have any comments or questions for Brandy on what she just explained to you?
How much is it going up next year? 1.27%.
Yeah, my calculation, and that was based on what they proposed for their max levy. So because of the deadlines to get these hearings done and mailings out, they basically just said, this is the max we're gonna spend. My understanding from listening to last week's meeting and talking with Gloria a few minutes this morning, that they changed that they've reduced the budget already. So, but based on what they published in the newspaper and what was sent out to you, the increase would be 1.72% for rural and 2.06 for urban.
Two times that by your assessed value.
No, you actually have to apply the assessment limitation, which gets you from your assessed value to your taxable value. For residential, if you have a $100,000 property, your actual taxable value is like $47,431, so it cuts it more than in half, and then you multiply that times the levy rate they're proposing, not times that 1.72%.
What's the levy?
What their proposed levy rate for urban was 6.34 and rural was 9.80. But like I said, they've already made some adjustments to that, so that's not even accurate anymore. So by the end of today, we could make a calculation.
As it stands, a 6.7% increase unless they reduce the budget.
Yeah, my understanding is in last week's meeting, they already did that, but that's outside of my ability to answer. That would be a better question for them.
What was that question again?
I wanted to know what the actual percentage is gonna go up next year.
Okay, yeah, so we've, since that date that we set this hearing, that was the first Monday in March. And every meeting since then, we've been meeting and we've been making cuts to the budget. And we may still make cuts. From last week's meeting, we talked about, from the last couple of meetings, we talked about moving a deputy that's in supplemental over to general services. We've got those that's one of the things we'll talk about, and I have those numbers as well for the board, and I've got a few extras here, not enough for everyone here. But those have come down, and what I have here shows that the board has now, I don't know if I want to hand any of those out or not, but this puts, so what Brandy's talking about is spot on about the 100% valuation. If you were to look at the tax notice that went out a year ago, they didn't do this 110% thing. This would have been the year to not do the 110% thing, and next year maybe do the 110% thing. Because as Brandy said, if your values did go up, you did some improvements or something and you went up in value by 10%, that was the number based on that max dollar that we put out there. But when we did that, it was every one of our intent. If you look at the numbers, that raised overall, the budget, it raised $220,000 more in general services tax dollars. None of us wanted to see that. And so we've been working very hard on this ever since that. And this page that I just sent out, and this is just due to the supervisor's day, because Morgan just got all those numbers entered Saturday. So I worked on this on Sunday to get these numbers to what the board talked about bringing this down to. And if you look at that bottom line number where it has the 294 from, I'm talking way down here, the $294 that it talks about at 100% for fiscal year 25, and what we're reducing, what I think we all want to do, whether this is the way we do it, but we all do intend to reduce. And you look over here, and at that 100% value, with this reduction that we've taken general services from 6.34 down to 6.2, that puts you at the same $294 if you do the calculations on $100,000 assessed house. The thing that changed is rollbacks, as well as us changing those tax dollars, so we could change those rollbacks. So what's happened with property, we already talked about how property tax reform is, there's legislation now. We're in the second year now of legislative reform that we used, some of you may recall, counties had a $3.50 general fund max levy. And Floyd County has never exceeded that $3.50, and some counties have, but we never have. And what Brandy talked about, the limitations that they put together, there's the 2% limitation that she's talked about that we were hit with, as well as there's a cap on what we can have for tax dollars. So there's two different things we're ratcheted down with the current legislation. So our tax rate for general fund now, but with these changes we've got from what we talked about last week that are in this new spreadsheet, takes us from 3.39806 per $1,000 of taxable value down to 3.36442. So that's coming down a little bit, and that's it. The only way you can levy in supplemental is if you've maxed your general. So we're going to draw more money in for general fund because valuations went up from last year to this year, and all those factors that you put in there that were ratcheted down. We're at 3.36442 for that tax rate. Our supplemental is the one where we're still working with the sheriff on some budget things, lots of budget issues that we've been working with since the first part of, since we started budgets in January. But the supplemental rate we put in to get that 6.34 that you saw on your tax sheet, on your notice, had 1.46151 for supplemental. What we've got proposed now is 1.39242. So we're bringing that supplemental down from what was, we expected to bring the supplemental down to what's on that page. The one that we don't have control over is the debt service. So last year was the first, or this current fiscal year that you're paying taxes on is the first year that we added new debt for our communications tower over at Rockford. So I can give you my opinion that I think that the state dropped the ball on, they want everybody to be on this I6 system, the statewide communications dispatch system. And they put up some towers around the area, but their towers weren't enough to reach them. So many counties have had to do projects like we had to do to build a tower. That's a $5 million debt that all of us taxpayers are paying, that I've talked to the legislators several times, but I even did it. If anybody went to the meeting last Friday at NIAC, I brought up there that the state fell short in not putting up more towers, instead of putting that burden on local government to have to spend $5 million to put up debt. So the current year's taxes for the fiscal year 25, the debt rate was 1.48043. And that was for those. We have 2 law enforcement debts and we have 1 of the communications tower debt. So we still have those 3 debts that we're paying for. The new tax rate on that is going down because of what those principal and interest payments are to 1.44316. So that is coming down just a little bit, which that was in that notice that you got. That was part of what made the $6.34. On the other levy for rural, it was, if you're a rural resident, $3.50 is what is current year. What is proposed with changes that we talked about is 3.46. So that one came down a little bit too. And then you can see on this sheet, we can make some more copies too if you'd like to see them. But you can see on this sheet where we're lowering your tax rate, but we still are adding more dollars. We're adding where we were at that 220,000 number, we're at let's see if I look at the right column. We're 126,000 overall. We're 72,809 in general fund, and we're when you add the rural to that, it's 126,711. Now you spread that over a budget that's nearly it's over an $18 million budget. You look at the percent of that budget increase, that's not a huge increase in a budget overall. When you look at the property tax side, that factors up a little bit more for the property tax side, but in the overall budget, that's not bad. But you know, again, part of that's debt, part of that is multiple things. Our ambulance contract goes up every year. We want to pay fair wages to our employees. We do have pay increases. We've knocked down what those pay increases were for many of those departments that asked for higher increases. We've knocked those down.
We're not done yet.
And we're not done yet. We might be able to do more.
Yeah, we're looking at a lot of different things. A lot of things are out of our control. The legislature has mandated that we have to do. Yeah. And yet, how do you pay for it? You know, so we're not done yet.
So you bring up, there are some unfunded mandates that we're subject to from this new property tax reform, or from the current property tax reform that we're in, with military exemptions. The state used to backfill those. They no longer backfill those. The Homestead 65, they're not backfilling that as well. These notices that you got in the mail, this is probably around an $8,000 bill. New expense that we've never had before. Have to do this now. The bonds on an election, the auditor has to mail out notices to every registered voter about those bonds. When we had that 2 years ago, it was probably around a $4,000 bill. Unfunded mandate that we're stuck with. So that's what some of these legislative proposals have done, is they've put this on local government for a burden. And we all want to, you know, when I hear people say you need to live within your means, we are trying very hard, but we have a lot of things that we have no control over. Juvenile probation, public defender, medical examiner.
Mental health part of the state is getting out is coming back on us, you know, and so
We have some tough decisions to make here in the next few days. But these decisions also need to be reasonable. They need to be fair for the county, and if it affects employees and their salaries, the decisions also need to be reasonable, and that's what we're trying to do. So we've been working at this for several weeks. Months.
January, we started in January.
yeah,
So if you were to look at this bottom part here, you can see the difference between, like what Randy talked about, $100,000 residential value, which is a truer picture. This puts us at same tax dollars, with just this part that we've done today, and like Boyd said, we don't know if we're done. If you do have an increase to 110% in your assessed value, and you apply that rollback, there's $110,000 number here. If your increase is somewhere in there, you can kind of gauge that when you're looking at the notices that Brandy talked about coming out while Levy.
Complicated. Next year, we'd have to look ahead a lot.
Yes.
And this is going to be an ongoing thing where the government is downsizing on a lot of things that we have no control over, and what services we're trying to provide, and keep some of that. We think, but there may be some services that we have to cut. Or want to, but don't want to raise your taxes either. We're trying really hard not to do that. So
Our neighbor county is already said they're going to have 4 layoffs July 1.
yeah.
We don't want to do layoffs either. We don't think our departments are overstaffed. Unless you're cutting services. Many counties have cut home care aid services. Eliminated it. Yeah, altogether. We want to be able to continue to provide good services for all of us. Yeah, and the new property tax reform bill is, this current one that we're in was a 5-year plan to get taxes controlled through the state, or better controlled through the state. This new property tax reform bill that's out there, Iowa has a pretty convoluted property tax system, and the new proposed system gets your assessed value closer to your taxable value. So of course, if your value goes up, we should be lowering levy rates. So if they get close to that 100%, which there'll be some exemptions that'll be reduced, like homestead exemption will be, which homestead they've changed from a credit to an exemption. So that means it hits the local level, not the state level, or not that, it hits after the taxable value. I probably didn't say that right, Brandy. But anyway, the exemptions are harder on us than the credits are.
So right now, sorry to interrupt, right now, if you have a credit against your property taxes, it is a credit to you and it reduces your taxes, but it also reduces the county's liability to tax you because the state pays us back out of other revenue sources like income and sales tax. Right when they switch it to the exemption side, it's just a reduction in your taxes, but that it redistributes that burden to everyone else. So for an example, the Homestead 65 credit, the first year you took in 1,600 applications and it reduced the taxable value for anyone that had that by 3,500 and then 6,500, 3,250 and then 6,500. It ended up being $11 million in loss of taxable valuation for the county. It is redistributed across everyone else. So that's what the state's doing it's like the grocery store. They're gonna give you this credit, but all it's doing is taking that same taxes that have to be levied and shelling them out across everyone else. They did the same thing when they changed the backfill for the commercial and industrial assessment limitation. It used to be assessed at 100% of the assessed value and they reduced it to 90%. And the state was backfilling that 10% loss in revenue to the county, and they took that away. They phased it out. So again, it redistributes back to the residential side. Everything they do is just causes redistribution. The same tax dollars have to be levied unless there is a cut.
Yes, thank you, Brandy.
I think both Brandy and Floyd have done a good job explaining this. Does anyone have any comments or questions for any of their explanations?
You know, all the numbers that they've thrown out the last half hour, just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's how
what
we
it
feel.
comes down to, I read here, all your wants. We want this, we want that. I live on a fixed income. You guys stick the knife in and turn it. Where do we go? How do I adjust to $7 eggs? Every time we open a bill,
I
They
understand.
priced this out of flood insurance. I live in a floodplain, so you say increased value. Every time the Shell Rock leaves its banks, boom, it goes down. But yet you come and you come and you come for more. Live the way I live within your means. That's all we ask.
And
You don't get what you want. You get what you need. And so far, whew,
Well, your
Stop
analogy is good, like with the eggs, because the eggs are increasing here as well. And we
How
don't
do you
do
do
things
it?
that we want to do. We do things that we think have an economic value to our community or are needed and for our departments to provide services that they have. But your first step in coming to these meetings, if you live in the rural area, go to your school hearings. If you're in the city, go to your city's hearings. Some of these numbers, you thought our 12% was a lot. There's one city that had over 20% on theirs. And so, go to those hearings, let them know, but they're all facing the same thing that we're facing with unfunded mandates. And, you look at a city, we have 5 cities that had public library voted 27-cent levy, and the legislators with this property tax reform wiped that out. And so now if they want to support their levies, they have to do it in their $8.10 general levy. They don't get to tax people 27 cents anymore. So the cities are struggling as well with unfunded mandates that are pushed with this legislation.
what I read here is we want a janitor. We want another policeman. We want.
We are not asking for another janitor or another policeman.
Well, you shouldn't list it here then.
When are we listing?
Is it here or?
On the sheet. here,
Yeah,
On the bottom.
it's there.
Oh,
Full-time janitorial. Janitor. Added a full-time janitor. Come on. If you need your toilets clean, you got people in jail, let them clean.
I don't know what you're looking at. That is not on our notice.
Added a full-time
Jailer.
Okay, wait a minute. Did I misread it?
We do have adding a full-time jailer.
Why isn't some of this picked up by all the policemen? Why can't they fill in for a jailer? There's ways to cut. I don't understand why you guys don't look into it.
We have talked with our,
We looked at a lot into that.
yeah,
I mean, we have the jailers, it's a 24-hour thing. And some of the problem also is if you have a female in there, you can't have a male jailer. It's gotta be a female.
You got a female
And
police?
Yeah, we do. But see, we gotta keep, and they can't work 24 hours.
I'm just saying there's ways and
Yeah, and we're
you
looking
need
at
to
every
stop
single one
coming
that we
to
can.
to us
Yeah.
to bail you out.
so, we're all taxpayers as well. But the jail is for safety of the inmates and safety for those jailers. They are supposed to have 2 jailers. We do not run with 2 jailers. Our deputies are out, sheriff's deputies are out on the road doing their thing. The other thing we have in here is a part-time dispatcher. Dispatch services works 24/7, so does jail 24/7, but they do it with 5 people. It's crazy. So those we feel are necessary things that we.
There has been some consideration on not adding another full-time jailer. Jeff Crooks made a comment that with the staff he has and some request in salary, he said if I could get by with what I have instead of hiring another jailer. But it still increases the workload on those people that are left.
And the safety concern.
And safety, yeah.
Well, that's how every money gets spent. It's under the guise of safety. You can get anything pushed through under the guise of safety. I mean, the first thing you mentioned was, oh, we're gonna take away hospice home care. And that gets tugging on everyone's heartstrings. Well, every single business other than government and maybe banks because they can make money out of fractional lending, has to live within their budget. I can't just, because Boyd's a customer of mine, I can't just, I want a new truck this month. Send him a bill willy-nilly, and then if he doesn't pay it, take what's his.
Yeah.
That's extortion. Full stop. You've made the egg analogy and kind of twisted. The only choice is we don't have to buy $7 eggs. There's ramen, there's cheaper. But I don't get fined and get things taken away because I don't buy $7 eggs. So everyone over here gets it, and that there's our services that we want. We want the roads clear. We want the roads clean. When we call 911, we want there to be somebody. But you can't tell me there's not a million things in this budget line that can be cut. Look at the federal level. And there was a very strict mandate by who we elected as president that less is more. Less government is more government as far as satisfaction.
Yeah, and thankfully, we don't have the debt the federal government has as well.
No, but it's proportional.
We have that debt.
We,
Well,
nothing
look across
compared.
the windows here.
No, but
No.
Look across the
that
windows. What's the number now? I think close to 10 million over budget.
No.
Is it 8?
It's never been 10 million over budget.
All right, well,
Not at all. I think those are fishtails that are happening. No, not at all. It was 13.5 for the addition and the courthouse, and we ended up under 18. So we're 3.5
but
million.
a bid's a bid. In my world, a bid.
What's that?
A bid's a bid. I'd like to know where the change orders and where these overages came from.
They're in we can show you whatever you would like. If we
The engineers,
presented
like-
at a past meeting with what all those expenses
That's
were.
just one thing. And I believe we've known about the radio towers for a long time. I believe you and the last board of supervisors all signed off on it. on that
Absolutely.
increase.
We feel that it's necessary. I'm gonna throw a safety card out there again. We feel that it was necessary to connect to the state system. I'm just disappointed that the state didn't do a better job of
It's all the
putting
same
more
money, but
towers
it
up.
came from the state. It's all of our money. So it doesn't matter.
Different money. This is your property tax dollars. The state dollars are income tax dollars and other sources that they have, not property tax. We only have property tax that we can.
you're starting the issue there. The dollars will come out of our pocket, right? At the end of the day, you're pulling money.
If the government at
Right.
any level doesn't have any money, it's taxpayer money.
Yes. And regardless, it comes from everybody in this group.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't think we're saying anything
And-
different.
I know you mentioned making reasonable cuts. That's an ideal scenario, right? Making reasonable cuts. However, looking at projections and looking at where we're at, you're gonna probably have to go beyond what you want to do as reasonable. That's just, right now, we're in one of those downturns and we are shrinking.
And that goes back to my comment, that what's coming, it's not just this year, it's next year that we have to start looking at.
It's 3 and 5 years.
I mean, we hear you, but there's some things that, get thrown back on us from the state that we have no control over. And since, they help fund some of these things or not funding them, that's our problem. I mean, for instance, the healthcare, where we have, these women go out, nurses, and help people in their homes, keep them there instead of, if we didn't have some of that healthcare, they would fall on going, to nursing homes where the cost is a lot more. But trying to keep them in their homes, I think is a good thing, and so, we gotta balance that. We're trying really hard. I mean, we really are. And, period.
And that's a huge thing. None of us want to do away with home care aides, for
Yeah,
example.
but
That's
they
a
are
costly thing on the
counties.
budget.
Some of them are completely
But-
eliminated.
Yes.
And that just is really unfortunate.
And if that causes that person to end up in a nursing home instead of staying in their home, then that's another cost on your tax side, not your property tax side, but on your, federal, state taxes, wherever the funding come is if they're getting assistance in a nursing home. So we think it's best to keep them in the home.
We have some things too that we have to deal with that hopefully the state will come around. I mean, it's a federal law that if somebody is in our jail for over 30 days, right, they lose their Medicare. Well, if that inmate needs mental or care and we have to go to the hospital, you know, $100,000 doesn't go very far. But the problem with that is we don't budget for that, and that comes back to us that we have to pay.
Isn't that part of the insurance package that you?
We don't have anything
No.
that'll cover that.
There-
But that's a federal law.
Right.
And then
Understand
we get stuck with that. And not only that, if you have, you know, in the budget, elder, juvenile delinquent, it's on us. And for 1 year's care, it's $80,000. And we have nothing to say about that.
And daily rates for those juveniles in those
Yeah.
care facilities went from $80 to $150 a day.
And that comes back to us. And
100%.
Well, you said your insurance increased here too.
a little bit, yes, it has. But we also, our insurance, we've done pretty well.
Our health insurance only increased $5.20 a month,
Yeah,
and 6% for dental. What increased was our general liability, our work comp, our,
yeah.
that increased. We've got a 13% increase in that based on what our insurance agent has told us.
So we all,
What's
all
that?
our
Have
insurance.
you looked at
So, I
other
mean,
insurance
yeah, well, hey,
stuff that's?
Since
you
the
do that
fires in
once a year?
California.
What
You
insurance?
look
all
into
comes
other
back
insurance
down.
companies once a year, or is this?
Getting socialism.
We do plan on doing that this year. It has been a long time since we've done that, but the board of supervisors, we are going to get insurance, check on that.
Some other.
We've
Yeah.
not done formal proposals, but when I was the auditor, we did check with ICAP and said, okay, where might our rates be? We've done some checks like that, but the board hasn't gone to an RFP or to get those bids on insurance, but that is the plan.
Yeah, we are doing that now.
So we do have 13%, and insurance went up, well, what we budgeted for this year, the insurance was expected to go up. Remember, Dennis, I wanna say it was like 25% is what they told us for
Yeah,
fiscal year
maybe.
25. Yeah, and it didn't go up quite that much.
Some homeowners insurance went up 44%.
That's right.
Yeah, I understand that.
So-
We've had that, and some insurance just quit. Say, here,
Yeah, you know.
Sure, we're not in Iowa, so,
Yeah,
Yeah, there's not as many insurance companies to
yeah, that's.
pick from even anymore.
yeah.
There's no, in the fire department, they used to have, insurance that was strictly for fire departments. I'm assuming there's stuff out there that's strictly for government agencies,
There are,
Yeah, there is.
but you don't, that's not one of yours. Yours
Uh,
are locally.
currently, we're with EMC Insurance out of Des Moines, and they insure multiple government entities. They insure our school.
City. Maybe, no, not the
They're
city.
with, no, they're with, Auxiliary. But, yeah, actually, there is an ICAP insurance, but that was quoted the last time, that was way higher than what our EMC insurance was.
Been looking at it, it's not just.
Oh, yeah.
We're shopping.
When it comes to increase in wages, what's the percentage you're looking at?
We negotiated 2.75% for secondary roads.
No. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, I follow you. Go ahead.
Did you mean employee wages?
Yes.
So, yeah, we negotiated for secondary roads 2.75. That's what most employees would be getting, the 2.75. There have been some employees, the compensation board that does elected officials recommendations for salaries. They came in for the attorney and the sheriff 9.33%. And on the sheriff's side, there's the back the blue new law that started a couple of years ago, and you're supposed to compare your sheriff's salary to what a city with the same population as your county, what that is one factor. And so that's but then there's other things that you check that with as well, with
Want to put it up there and have and start that war.
in-state,
So-
out-of-state. John, could you mute your phone, please?
Well, right, but it's bad enough over, we're gonna buy stickers for the trailer already, you know?
John, could you please mute your phone?
Well, that's what Jesse said, oh, just put it out there. Well, I know enough, because I know how the, you know, it's gonna be a rolling meeting, they call it. We'll get a new trailer, why didn't we talk about the sticker? I thought of it.
I'll try to talk louder over John.
I just wasn't gonna go there that much.
They also have to check in-state, out-of-state, government, private sector. That's the task that they do. They came up with a 9.33 for the county attorney and
Right,
the
so I
sheriff.
don't. I just
And they
learned
came
that,
up with
you know,
4.66.
You
For the
learn
other
that
elected
spot, you work with
The
some
other
people
elected
and they
officials
later
have
heard
been
what happened to
reduced to
Pheasants Forever.
2.75,
Yeah.
and the sheriff.
The
at this
backdoor
point,
politics.
8.
So Lucas and I never got to the plate or you know, it's done by text with Thomas and Jesse, and I just sat there mute, but there's other people in the room the other day who really
Have to tighten their belt.
campaigning and bullshit traveling around. Yeah, I
You get that thing ready?
Yep. Thank you.
You turn John off, did you?
Yeah.
How often do they get that raise? Every year?
Well, each year the compensation board does their process and makes a recommendation, but I think probably every year the board of supervisors has reduced it.
They need
Very,
to put a freeze on their wages. Hell, I worked at one place for 16 years and never got a raise.
And I
Asked for it and asked for it, but never got it. So why should the county guys get a raise every year?
well, we
You know,
are,
I mean, it takes 4 guys to put one post in, that's pretty bad.
the two of them are sitting in the truck. Yeah,
And you can't deny that.
there are places cut, there's a lot of waste. But about a month ago, I go to the Y every morning. And it was a city truck, here's a pile of snow, which God was melting, but and here's one man sitting in the nice dump truck. The other man running the end loader. You know, why couldn't the guy running the end loader go to the truck and take it and empty it? That's waste. You've got to use your head, your common sense.
that, I would suggest you talk to the city if that happened over at the Y, but
Well-
I will say, the same thing does happen here.
You bet
When
it does.
they're cleaning the lots out here.
Yeah.
But, they,
We're looking for efficiencies wherever we can find them. And we're asking the departments to at least look at a 1% reduction
Yeah.
in efficiencies. And if they all did that, it would amount to quite a bit of money.
Yes, it would.
And a lot of them kind of struggle with that a little bit, finding those efficiencies, but I'm still convinced that they're there somewhere.
And they struggle with it because most of them are younger people and they're spoiled. You know? I really think so.
So what was the justification of 8% on instead of the 2.7 cost of living wages across the board? Well, it just go cost of living adjustment for all wages. I mean, that's what they normally do.
Yeah, but sheriff's department is a little different. They're autonomous, I guess is the right term for that.
they're not autonomous, they're just, they have this new back to blue law that you
Yeah,
have to make effort to comply with.
Yeah.
What does that state? Does it say they have to have an 8% raise no matter what?
No, it's those comparisons.
But
The
they
wage of a police chief in a city the
They're
same size.
comparing Iowa rural, or are they
Well,
comparing
for instance,
Iowa total?
with our sheriff, our county population is about 15,000 people.
Yeah.
So we have to look at cities that have cities that have 15,000
Police chief.
population. And then compare what their police chief is getting in that city of 15,000 to what our sheriff is getting in the county for the same population.
That's the law.
That's the
That
law,
is
it's
the
called
law.
back to blue. And we don't have to get our sheriff there overnight. We can take time to do it. But in most cases, our sheriff is below that salary range.
Right, because we're more rural than a.
Yep,
So is the factor that the entire county border, or is Charles City taken out of that because they have 24-hour police service themselves and then Door Springs is?
So that's where I would say the legislation, I would say there's a flaw in that. Because there's other factors even, whether you have a full-time city or whether you have Interstate 80, like Newton at one time was one of the ones you compared to. I think it was Newton, I can't remember. Well, Newton got highway or Interstate 80 going through it. Whole different.
Indianola was another town similar.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's some flaws with, but again, that's one factor that you look at. You also look at the other things like comparable, in-state, out-of-state, private sector, public sector, and a lot of those things are hard to do in private sector because you don't always get private sector wages type
This is
things.
your interpretation of the law, or is?
No, that is the law.
Exactly what you have
Chapter
to do.
331, 903 or 905.
So it says you all have to be comparable, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
Well, that says that's what the compensation board is supposed to provide to the board of supervisors for a recommendation.
It's just a recommendation, it's
Yes.
not law.
Yeah,
Yes.
we
So
say,
you could recommend
I
2.7%.
don't think we've paid whatever the composition board has recommended ever, have we?
We have, that it's often been
But
reduced.
it's still up to you what percentage you can adjust then, right?
we don't have to bring
It
it up
is.
all at once.
What's the,
We'll take our time, you know.
Well, I realize that, but what I'm saying, it's 8% this year, and then next year, is it gonna be 7%?
Well,
Is it gonna be 1%
Again,
It's all up to you
every
guys.
year.
So why don't you start low and kind of build it up over 10 years instead of 1 and 2 years? Or
and
whatever.
like I said earlier, we're not done yet. You know, with looking at this, I mean, and that is one thing that's, we still have to do. And we've been working on, you
But
know.
it's still the board's
It
decision of
is,
what
it is.
increase the percentage, right?
But I would say that last year, when the compensation board came with the recommendations, I can't remember what they were, but the board cut them. What the recommendation was based on the back of blue and all that for the sheriff, that got reduced already. And the intent last year was, let's not do it in 1 year, let's do it over time. Well, this year, our recommendation is, higher.
So last
And-
year, what was the difference between the
Well, we don't-
recommendation and that?
We also have a choice of not using the compensation board.
Okay,
But it's still the same process.
Yeah, still, we have to go by the state guidelines.
Yeah.
right, but still, it's your discretion of what percentage
We-
anybody gets.
There potentially could be some legal issues if you're not complying with that that you don't have an intent to do
It's
the back
compliant
of the
as
law.
long as you discuss it and set the percentage, right?
Uh,
It's not like they
That,
say it
that
has to
could
be
be
5%.
to see what comes with, if a sheriff wants to,
Test it or whatever.
yeah, I mean,
Well,
but that's not why
they're
we're doing it.
elected, so I mean, they could contest it one or twice.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm
I don't
not,
understand why you guys can't just
no,
across the board to cost of living wage. And wouldn't that be easy because of labor and everything else out there? They don't get a 8% hike every other year or every year.
but part of this is, you have to know what is a fair wage to begin with. That's what the process is about. What is the fair
Yeah.
wage? If a fair wage is low and you just keep doing cost of living, that's where you could get yourself into trouble with that back to blue side. If you're not even getting to that, what they tell you you're supposed to be comparing to, and if you're never going to, you gotta get to your fair wage first.
So like, when the compensation board, when they present you the data, do they show you the comps? Like, we look at these cities, their, total county revenue or their city revenue based on those salaries?
Yeah, we have the comps.
Okay, because like you said, you're giving them almost 3 times what you're giving everybody else, right? And you're trying to make good on getting them closer to these other averages, but why 3 times? Why not double what you're giving everybody else?
Yeah, we haven't made that decision.
I know,
But yeah, but I
But
get
that's,
your
I mean,
point.
that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
You're locking everybody else in that's doing their job at 2.75 and you're bumping them way up by 8%.
The
Which-
part that,
Obviously, like I said, you're balancing the mandate, but you don't have the funds.
the part that catches us with this financially is the bargaining the contract that we have with the Sheriff's Deputies Association is several years ago, the Board of Supervisors tied their compensation to the sheriff's compensation. So that's one of the things that hits us hard in this budget is you got your sheriff's wage at, that you have to do the back to blue for. Well, now that trickles because of that contract to all of the deputies.
In North Springs, we just decoupled that from the administrator. Now it's more of a merit based.
Yeah, we're still in our contract period.
I think the audacity is pretty rich, the fact that they're in a state-of-the-art facility now, and then still want even more. I'm just saying that.
I will say that none of them have said we
I'm not
want
saying
this.
first, no, I agree, but they should.
So are they gonna object if they don't get it? If the sheriff says they really don't want it, but you're gonna give it to them
I'm
anyway?
not saying they don't want it.
As well as that.
Well, they get it, it's automatic.
It's whatever we do for the sheriff that's going to be the increase they're going to get
They get,
because of the
they get
contract.
a percentage of the sheriff's salary.
So if you lower everything gets, which,
But these raises they're asking for that, I'm sure, Department, was there, saw something in the paper on that? Was that for jailers or something they wanted an increase?
Yes, he did.
That's over and above this automatic deal, right?
Well, the jailers are different from the sheriffs and their deputies.
It doesn't go under his,
They're paid.
Not
an
under
hourly rate.
contract for wages though.
They're an
But
hourly
he
rate.
did ask for an increase for the jailers from $22 an hour to $27 an hour to retain jailers, because he's had a lot of turnover with jailers. And that's in the budget now for 25, right? 25 for the jailers.
Yes.
Yeah,
we're
25.
looking at that now.
So he asked 27, to come down to 25, and like Floyd says, we're not sure if that's done yet.
When we were asked to vote for the new facility over there, we were told at that time if we put this in, that would actually show a profit down the road.
I don't know that it was ever gonna go show a profit. Because government doesn't technically make a profit, because otherwise we're taxing you too much if we're making a profit.
But, it was said, there's such a shortage of jails around that it's actually gonna show something, which that would have cut down on something, but I don't foresee that ever happening.
Yeah, the sheriff was telling us the other day when he was here that the recommendations at that time were to have 11 jailers. And we have in the budget
9.
8 plus a lead jailer who gets $2, who currently gets $1 an hour more than the jailers, but he's asked for $2 an hour more for that lead administrator. Which that $2 is in the budget also.
How do you top off the road crew and stuff on wages? Do you
2
keep
years.
Do you keep paying them, say, from $25 to $50 an hour for a road crew man? Or do you cut him off at that 25?
So
Because he's getting
We were in
road crew.
negotiations with the Teamsters on that for a couple of sessions and,
Or you gotta put.
So it's 2 years.
The thing is, they
It's
gave
2
me
years.
the first one 10% raise, okay, and then more time off and all that. And we stuck at 2.75 and no extra time, but when you look at these other departments and you say you should just have carte blanche, 2.75%, you gotta also look at, what the people have to do in some of these departments, and they all vary. And, we're trying to be fair with everybody and meet comparables in other counties and what, the auditors being paid over there as opposed to what we're at, and the workload we're just trying to be fair. Like I'm just really, this whole care, these nurses that go out just have not been paid very well. I think we need to bring them up some because you'd rather stay in your home, and my mother and father-in-law, which recently passed away, I mean, for 2 years, that was really a great service to keep them in their home instead of paying $9,000 a piece in nursing homes. So, what's their care worth? And we have to struggle with that.
Well, wouldn't it be better to take off some sheriff's increase and throw it at that instead of, and pick and choose the necessities?
And then you gotta make sure which fund that comes out of.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I understand there's a lot of.
because the supplemental takes care of the IPers and the insurance and,
But
you
you
know what I
still
mean?
have the right to.
But you can't move some funds over into others, but you can, but there are some that you can.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's a conundrum.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, and I didn't realize that until I got on. I
But
mean,
if you save on this category, you can increase this category, right? You can't move funds, but you can increase and decrease,
well,
right?
for instance, the rural fund, we have 4 deputies in
For
rural.
deputies.
That comes out of the rural fund, but it doesn't come out of the general fund. But for the rural fund, to make that balance, we're thinking of moving 2 deputies back to the general fund. or-
No, that was
How are we doing
supplemental, general supplemental
There you go.
to a civil
So
deputy.
you can still,
Well, there are
Juggle the
some
figures,
things that
so
you
that-
can do and.
There's
well, I
not
tell you,
much we
it's-
can do
it's a
on the rural
learning
side.
curve on this. And, we're trying, we really are.
Not much we can do on the rural.
Yeah,
On the home care, my mom benefited from that service up until she passed. But again, why does it always gotta be spread out against everyone? They could send a bill to that residence, to that taken care receiver. And most of the time, the insurance would probably, their own personal insurance would probably cover that bill.
It's
Why is it
about-
gotta be 100% supplemented by the county and by the rest of
I
us?
don't know.
There's a pay scale, there's a income scale for what they're charged. And if it can be filed against insurance, it's filed against insurance. They do that. And the increase that's in there for those aides, that the home care aides, not the rest of the department, but those aides is 5%. And that puts them at like $18 an hour.
They're all less than $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And I agree.
It's a great service.
You, with a sheriff or any law enforcement, you get to kind of pick and choose what situations to some extent you want to be involved with. But their nurses are there every single day. And when you're sick and in pain, you're not friendly.
Yeah.
And so they're beyond 365 days
Yeah.
a year. So I agree 100% with that. But that's where we're
And see,
using
that's,
our
that's how come
distraction
we
here.
gotta balance and bring some of that up.
You know.
And I agree, some of it's too much, and, but like I said, we're not done yet, but boy, it's getting drawn out. We gotta be done with this by April. A couple of weeks, we have to have this budget
They have
set.
to have it put in paper.
Yeah,
And I know you guys are getting heat by the departments, but that's a small number compared to how many, I represent, let's just look at me, it's 5,000 people. We're here on a Monday at 8:30, how many people can't afford, first of all, to take that time off? I feel privileged sitting in here, having the ability to manipulate my schedule and my workload, but I represent 5,000 people that can't be here right now. And so you gotta think of that there's just a few of us in here that, again, can manipulate our schedule to be here, but that's privilege in today's economy. There's people that can't, there's employers that say, no, you can't be, or you're fired. So well, I guess I'll just get the knife stick to us and keep paying the bills so they don't take everything from me it's an illusion that we own anything in this country. It's a lifetime lease until you die, and then that lease is just transferred to somebody else. The fact that you can take what I can hand you $10 million cash, green bills to you, Boyd, for your property, but I miss a year's worth of payments and somebody can buy it for $10,000? how did that even get passed? In some fine print in a multi-page bill,
Talking about, let's say, the
the fact that you can take my property if I don't
Tax
pay
sale?
taxes. That's
the tax sale,
Yeah,
that's a state law.
no, I know, but I'm just
State
saying as a
legislation.
whole, how did that even get
Well,
pushed through?
Well, the only,
massive.
the
A lot
county
of this
part
has
of all
been
of that,
baked in and
No, I know.
for years.
What's the repercussion of saying no to the state on anything? I know funding and money, so I keep
that's kind of getting off track
Yeah.
of what our hearing's about today.
But we understand, and we really appreciate everybody coming in and their comments. I mean, we need to hear that. And we're
I know,
pretty attuned to what's going on, you know.
and you're fresh to this too, so.
Oh, yeah, the learning curve on this, I thought would be, you know, but it's like a moonshot. And, you know, it's difficult, you know.
They're gonna have to put cooling chairs in here for you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta get up once in a while. Are there any other comments regarding,
You said when I came here a little bit ago, that you have gone to the department heads and instructed or asked them to cut their expenses by 1% or so. That's what I wanted to hear. All this other stuff of the state this, the state that, I don't care. I can't do anything about that. Local is where, 10,000 here, 5,000 here, pretty soon it adds up. And you said that's what I came here to hear.
That's our process every year, and, you know.
Well, that's what I came here to hear. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear about the state saying this, the state saying that. I wanted to hear local, what you
Yeah.
done.
20 years as the auditor here, every time we've gone and said, readjust your numbers for the current year that we're in, because that changes your beginning fund balance for the next year. And then, you know, what can you do?
And we were down in Des Moines last week, and they're talking about just the 2% coming to the counties. I mean, cutting us even further, you know, and what we get. So this, like I said earlier, what we do this year is gonna have ramifications for next year. And we gotta figure out a way to keep this down. I mean, we understand, guys. I pay taxes too, you know.
Maybe, you know, you don't want to see anybody lose their jobs, but maybe instead of that, like on the health insurance side, maybe like the singles need to pay more on their health insurance and the families need to pay a little more on their family health insurance to offset. I don't know how many counties employees there is, but
there's all over 100, I think.
a single paying zero on health insurance is pretty unheard of in anything, you know.
And the way we've looked at that is we've looked at what the benefit dollars are, and the benefit of the single health insurance compared to the benefit of paying 75% of a family plan is about a $10,000 difference.
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, that's always kind of been where I used to think of how we had one employee that a single person, one income, and across the desk from her was an employee that had 4 or 5 kids. And why should she the single person have to pay when the person right across from her is getting a much larger benefit than she is? That's kind of been my theory on that. But it's always something to consider.
I know in the private sector that if I don't have extra money that month, I don't put into my retirement, my 401k. I know it's not, can't go all or nothing, but I'm just saying, so all of us have to go without to get through the slow and rough times. And not just go without and then catch back up, because like all these bogus government shutdowns and all that stuff, no, they all get repaid, all their back pay, all the back benefits, all that stuff. I'm saying to truly make this work, we go without, because there's weeks I have to eat ramen. And then there's weeks I get to gorge on a steak.
You made me think of one more thing when you're talking about 401k. Of course, we have IPERS, and IPERS on the law enforcement side went from, for the county's share to pay, went from 8.31% to 12.09% or something like that. We can't do anything about it. We gotta pay it.
And that comes out of the
I'd like to know
supplemental.
who these they are, because there's a lot of theys going around, and everyone washed their hands like, oh, it's not our deal. What's the repercussion saying, no, we can't afford that?
Yeah, you're
On
all
waivers?
elected.
I'm just saying in anything that you say, well, this is state mandated, this is government mandated, this is this, this.
Well, we have to be compliant with the code to begin with. Outside of that, if we try to hold every department head and elected official accountable for their budgets.
So is every county gotta pay that 12% IFRS?
For law enforcement, they do.
They do.
Yeah, that's state law.
Sounds like we need to get the counties together and lobby against the state. That's where it's coming down from.
Well, IFRS is, I don't quite know the process, but IFRS is established, it's its own standalone thing, and they look at the positions. The sheriff's deputies, or sheriff and deputies, were 8.31%, where all the other regular employees were 9.44%. And same with just jailers. Jailers were less than a regular employee. And so they do those adjustments periodically. Sometimes I think it's like this catch-up kind of thing that they do. But I've never seen anything as high as 12%. But that's, we have no choice. But that's a big chunk of this budget to go on those wages to 12%.
I just wanted to address something that you said. I think that that is probably less public, is that each office has an affiliate, call it, through ISAC, which is the Iowa State Association of Counties. And we all do represent these problems to those state legislators. The assessor's affiliate has a lobbyist, ISAC has a lobbyist that we work with from our department. And when we see these things coming through, or we can see like they're redistributing the tax burden and it's just a shell game, and we see that happening, we definitely do speak up at the state level. So it's not necessarily something that you see so much talked about locally, but our affiliates, and so each auditor and treasurer and recorder and everything, supervisors, engineers, all have that. We do have representatives speaking up in your favor. I think as a department head myself, what we do, we're all very passionate about what we do, and we take what we do very seriously. And that we look at what we provide as a service to the community. Not always a service that is appreciated in some respects, but we do take it very seriously. And I think I can speak for the department heads here that that's something that we want to provide all the services that we can. And we understand that sometimes cutting services is the only way to cut dollars. And that's painful to us, but I think that every department here would entertain suggestions. Like what services, what things do you want us to do? Like what can you live with and live without? We're to a point where, again, we feel passionate about what we do and we want to keep all those things. And the supervisors definitely challenged every department, including my own, to look at that. So I would say if you guys have suggestions, if you guys have something that you think this needs to be different, I would hesitate to say that not to give our employees raises and not to be competitive with health insurance. We have a couple of big businesses in Tri-City in particular that steal our lower level employees, and if we're not competitive, we won't have staff. When I applied for my job in the assessor's office, there was 50, 60, 75 applicants for that job. When we most recently hired, we had 10. So these jobs are not coveted. We take a lot of, combative comments from the public in these jobs. And when you're hiring people at those salaries, if you're not competitive with your benefit package and your salary, they can go to a job and they can work at Quick Start, and they can work at Zoetis, and they can live in peace and go to work and just get their paycheck. So I would advocate for departments from that please don't take this out on our employees. I realize you have to have cuts. And when it comes to my office, we only have 3 people. We went from 4 to 3 a few years ago, and we're trying to be our best fiscally and responsible. But if there's something like a service that you're like, I just don't think this is needed. You spend $5,000 a year for this, and I don't think you need it. Tell us that, because if you guys don't want it, we won't pay for it. But I think that if you guys had some ideas there, it would maybe make your guys' jobs a little easier too, to say, okay, obviously home health care is a passionate position that we don't want to touch. Any sort of public safety is difficult to talk about, but if there's something else, then just say what you guys think we should do. I would entertain that for my own office. So.
I think Brandy brings up a good point. It may mean some cuts of services to make our budget work. Maybe not so much this year, but going forward. It's just a fact reality and, not a pleasant one, but, we probably will have to take a hard look at that, so.
Yeah, it's, I remember Roy Schwickrath, when he was county supervisor, often saying, we shouldn't be balancing our budget on the backs of our employees. And we do need to be competitive. We're a large employer. We don't, some of these jobs, you can't, it's not easy to train somebody and you're losing them because they can go somewhere else for more pay. They're not easy jobs to step into. A lot of them aren't. Yeah, but
Any more comments or suggestions for us? We've been doing this for over an hour now. We've learned a lot. I hope you guys have learned something too. And I certainly thank everyone for coming this morning. Unless there's more comments or discussion.
I can just say from the private side, in Osage, it's the same thing. We don't have many applicants. And I mean, our starting wage is $22.50. We still don't see applicants.
I am
So
hearing
there's-
that from every
there's just
industry, it seems like.
Something's changing.
I don't know where they're at. I don't know. I'm hearing
I
the same.
don't think they're in the state anymore. I mean, I think they're moving to cities. I mean,
The baby
You-
bubble has burst.
well, there's that, and then we ran all the acreages out of the community for more farm ground. And a lot of my high school friends, they wanted to live on a small acreage. And we got rid of all of them. They said, well, I'm gonna live someplace with more amenities.
And local, small rural areas that can get hit really hard by this. And we talked about this 2% limitation. And we've been fortunate that we've had valuation growth with new construction projects and new housing and different things like that in Floyd County. But you look at some of those southern tiers counties, they don't have much opportunity for growth. They're, the current property tax reform and the proposed property tax reform is probably gonna hit them harder, faster than it will some of the other rural areas.
Some of these counties have only got 5,000 or 6,000 people, but they have to provide the services that we provide. And I mean, we're not a large county either, but boy, there's a lot worse off than that.
Aside from the windmills, which I know you're very pro, what's other options for tax? Do we have any other businesses come in that
We need you to build a new home.
I need to be able to afford it, and then I need to be not doxed at 110% tax rate? And that's the other thing is, look, just yesterday I drove through Mason City and you realize how dilapidated almost every house is. You know why? Because there's a negative incentive to improve any curb appeal because you're doxed immediately. Immediately. You're flagged and the assessor comes right through the town and hawks on it and, oh, gotcha.
I can tell you that the city of Charles City has you build a new home, you have an abatement, 100% abatement of your taxes for 10 years on that new construction.
Why?
If you
They can afford to buy
to
it.
draw people to our community. If you have a Charles, if
Draw
you,
new ones in
So
and
they
send the
got-
old packet.
Yeah.
Like, they've
if,
done study after
they're-
study that those incentives penalize everybody else.
that's what many, well, I don't know how much new construction they're getting, but I guess that's the telltale of it is it working or not? But if you even have a new, do remodeling in your home and I don't know if it's 10%.
It increased the value by 10%.
Yeah, 10%, increases your value by 10%, that difference, that new construction value, they are abating that as well.
And there's the next thing, whose opinion? There's always three things: the bank's value, your value, and the buyer's value. They're
This
never the
is-
same.
This
Like you
is
said,
the
so-
assessment.
Just so one entity that has a
Nobody fills
positive
that void.
incentive to collect taxpayer money.
What's that?
There's a positive incentive to assess it for more.
That's actually not true. So just to explain how our assessments work, we have two things that we base everything off. First is the cost manual from the Department of Revenue, and that is back factor, and it's checked by the Department of Revenue every 2 years. And so we basically build everybody's replacement cost using that cost manual that's provided to us and required by law by the Department of Revenue. And then it's factored to our local market. The local market is judged off sales ratio. So your example of if you fix up your house, here comes the assessor through and we assess value. We absolutely do that. And I won't hide behind that. But what happens is if you fix up your house and get a curb appeal and I am your next door neighbor and I don't do that, and Morgan comes and she wants to buy a house, she's gonna buy yours and she's gonna pay more for it. And that affects everybody. So we take all the sales in the county every year and we create a sales ratio, is the sales price divided by the assessed value, and we get a percentage. So we have to, the median sales ratio of all those good sales, which is about 185 to 200 sales a year, we have to be between 95 and 105% on our median assessment. And if we're not, we're required by law to raise value. If I don't raise the value, the Department of Revenue comes and does it for us. And if I'm 10% low, they apply 10% to everybody, fair or otherwise. And it's not fair. So we do it ourselves. And I know it's a thankless job and I'm prepared to take any comments and heat that you have regarding that. But here is my other comment. This is where this comes into truth in taxation and transparency. I say this to people every time they call me. If I doubled every value in this room, completely doubled everybody's assessed value, and no taxing authorities ask for more money, your value would double, your levy rate would be cut in half, and you pay no more tax dollars. Our role as the assessor is to make sure that everybody is taxed and fairly and proportionate to the market value or the assessed value of their property. And we just treat everybody, we paint everybody with the same brush. So it's not like I'm, raising his value because he did something and you did the same thing and I'm not raising his value. We don't do it that way. We have a cost manual that guides us. So we have entities, there's a comment here in the state that's called the Dirty 30. There's 30 taxing authorities that maxed out their levies. They found every levy rate they could levy and they maxed it out. The legislators have had enough. They've had enough of hiding behind levy rates when assessed values go up, saying we didn't raise our levy rate, but you asked for $500,000 more dollars. That's not being transparent and that's being untruthful. So legislators had enough of these Dirty 30 and they started blanketing the state with this legislation to prevent their ability to do that. And that's where this hearing comes in. That's where this mailing comes in. The problem is they fall short in how it actually works. And they don't listen to enough of us. But it's not wrong to be sitting here saying they're going to ask for $126,000 more dollars. Like Lori said, they're absolutely cutting the levy rate, but because assessed values went up and the taxing value went up, the taxable value, they're going to ask for more money. Very transparent, and I appreciate that. Last year, I came to the board meeting and told them, you are lowering your levy rate, but you're asking for more money, and it had to do with the debt service. And I just wanted that to be made clear. But I think that we have to remember that everybody has a job and a role that they have to do. Like I said, mine's kind of thankless, but it has less to do with the assessed value. Assessed value is to just be fair and more to do with the taxes, the actual tax dollars. And so I appreciate all your comments today and you guys are definitely hitting on that. But the assessed value is really just meant for fairness. And I know what I do feels unfair to most of you. And there's an appeal process if you disagree with your value. And again, to support that transparency. And if you guys are uncomfortable or unhappy with your value and you feel like if you put your house on the market or your property on the market, you couldn't sell it for what we have it assessed at, that's a conversation to definitely have with me because it does roll out into this, right? If I'm too high on your value, you're definitely going to pay more taxes. So absolutely have that conversation with me. But again, the purpose of it is I'm very passionate about this fairness and transparency. And if you don't believe I'm being fair or transparent, like let's talk about that. Because I would at a public forum just like this, I was asked to show here and I'm happy to be here just to educate you guys on the property tax system and be as transparent as we can about this. So whatever questions you have, like hit me with them, come upstairs to my office afterwards today, make an appointment with me. We'll go through your property like individually. I would absolutely do that.
And I'm just gonna add, in the 20 plus years that I've been working for the county, I don't know how many times I have addressed statements that people have made that said the county needed more money, so the assessor is increasing value, so they have more money for their budget. You believe that doesn't happen?
So for example, 2025 assessments, you'll get mailed out next week. They won't even budget on it for a year. So there's areas in the county that are going to see an increase in assessed value, and there's areas in the counties that are going to see a decrease. And those places that are going to see a decrease, I could name them, but I won't. Those taxing authorities, those boards are going to come to me and say, what the heck? But I'm doing what's fair and just. So they're not getting the values. They budget the values 18 months after I assess them, basically, or that's when you start like accruing taxes against them. So it's definitely not done in that order that they come and say, we need more money. The second half of that is the assessment limitation that's currently in place is there to prevent that. So I assess everybody's value and I raise it 10%. I'll give you agricultural, and some of this will be sticker shock to you farmers, but agricultural values are based on a productivity factor and a value and a price per acre that's given to us by the state of Iowa. We have no control over it. We apply that. Floyd County is going to see a 30% increase in ag valuations on your assessments that you get next week. So here's the deal, 30% is the average across the state. The lowest was 16, the highest was 64. The assessment limitation is in place to take your assessed value to your taxable value and only allow a 3% growth in that class across the entire state. So the closer Floyd County falls to that average, the more likely it means that the assessment limitation or the rollback is going to take your taxable or your assessed value and turn it into a taxable value that's equal to what it was last year. So you're gonna see your assessment notice and it's like, holy crap, I have a 30% growth in my assessed value. But by the time it gets through the rollback to your taxable value, you will see almost no increase in your taxable value because we're at the same thing. And that's the way the state is designed to prevent a huge swings in valuations in assessed value that causes a lack of stability for your property tax bill and also a lack of stability for their levy rates. Because again, if you had a big swing, obviously a taxing authority could take advantage of that and it would be wrong to do so. But if you had a big downward swing, suddenly we have employees and services and all these things that we have to do, roads to grade and stuff, and we don't have any money because we can't levy enough because levies are capped. There's max levies for everybody.
Yeah, and so just tag onto that, $3.50 that we used to have that she talks about, the dirty 30, the 30 counties that exceeded that. There were reasons that you could exceed your $3.50, and they did it as appropriately. They had to have extra hearing and things like that in order to do that. But it became, for some of them, it became a habitual thing. Every year they were exceeding the $3.50. And so I do think that the legislator is cracking down on local government. And I'm happy to say that we never had exceeded the $3.50. But you mentioned, how do we, you said, and I don't know if you were talking about wind turbines to me, because I am pro wind for wind turbines. And those turbines bring, where can we get our value,
What's
get
the
more
tax levy
value?
on that?
What's that?
What's the stipulations? Because the research I've done is you put these windmills up, they have their own tax abatement. And then if they just replace the blades on them, they reset that tax abatement as new. And
I'll speak to that. Wind turbines have a special valuation as provided by the Code of Iowa, and there's no market value for it. They're commercial farms. There's no market value for a wind turbine. Nobody's gonna sell a commercial wind turbine farm, right? If anything, it's like a company acquiring another utility company, and so that never happens. So how do you set market value on something that's never sold? You can't. So they wrote into code a special valuation procedure, which takes their acquisition cost, which is provided to us by the company, and it's basically every cost associated with that wind turbine project, and it's divided up equally between the number of turbines. And then the valuation is phased in over 7 years. So the first year they pay no property tax on it. It's the year of construction. There's no property tax paid. And then it's 5% per year of the acquisition cost is the assessed value up through the 7th year, which is at 30%. So once the net acquisition cost is assessed at 30% of that, that is where they max out for 20 years or until the supervisor, well, indefinitely, or if the supervisors would repeal their wind turbine ordinance, then that's a whole problem. And it hasn't happened. We have a wind turbine ordinance. But if they repower, so this went through legislation and had a bunch of Supreme Court cases. If they repower them is what it's called, where they replace the wind turbines and everything, it does not change their net acquisition cost and it does not reset that phase in of 30%. And that's why that came to a lawsuit, because that's what they were doing. They were going out to, again, everybody figures out how to reduce their taxes, companies and people alike. So they realized if we go and throw some new blades on this, it increases our output or input of electricity, but then we can start this, 7-year clock all over and not pay taxes the first year and then get our taxes brought way down. And so the legislation and then through case law basically decided, no, you cannot do that. So like the Mid-American wind turbines have been at 30% for several years now.
And bring in something like 38,500, right, per year, per turbine, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it's a
Right
good
now.
amount. And the new turbines would obviously provide a lot of growth. To address your
while
question.
destroying our water, so.
Yeah,
But they're
yeah,
making a deal.
well, yeah, and so
No, that's our-
whether you're here or there, yeah.
And I didn't mean to bring it up. I didn't mean to bring it up for that. You asked what that means. And I'm only bringing it up because I listened to an ISAC legislative update a couple of weeks ago. And one of the comments that was made on that webinar was it was an interpretation that the state legislators have pretty much handed rural Iowa an opportunity to get new revenues with wind turbines. And with moratoriums and ordinances that prevent them from coming in, that's about 50% of the counties. And so that's a revenue source that if that interpretation that they're saying is the state's coming down on you because you're not taking advantage of opportunities that you have to support the state's wind energy initiative. But that's one source. I will say I serve on the Area Development Corp board, and the executive director is calling meetings all the time with potential companies that are looking for a place to go in our industrial park area or wherever, or looking at funding. We're in Southwest Bypass TIF as well, looking at Zoetis and Cambridge, where they are looking at expanding and providing some support for that, which keeps your employees here, increases the value of those projects. We've been fortunate to have those increases in values in some of those manufacturing companies that has helped us at all. But some of those, again, those smaller rural areas don't have those opportunities. We need to keep working on opportunities.
As he mentioned,
What's
the
that?
other thing you addressed on, now we're upping our farmland by 30%. That means that, and I'm gonna pick on farmers a little bit here, not saying they're all greedy, but now you just said that value of that dirt underneath that tree, underneath that acreage, abandoned acreage, or maybe dilapidated, is now more valuable than that structure, or that, just hear me out.
Yeah.
So now we don't have a young couple coming to the rural area to build a new house. That's the tax direction we should be looking for, not windmills, because now these companies can't come here because we don't have the people, like he alluded to. Everyone is short. I can't hire somebody right now.
Right, so just to clarify, maybe I didn't make this clear the first time. Farmland is not assessed at market value, it's assessed at a productivity value, which right now, so the average market value of an acre of property is probably somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 to buy an acre of land, regardless of what you're gonna do for it in the county, I would say. And so we assessed it at like $2,300 per acre. And so it is productivity, and they use income and expense formulas for all row crop basically and livestock to calculate those prices. And so again, the increase of 30% is just saying that they can mathematically show in their formula that there was an increase in value, an increase in income to those farmers of 30%, and that's why it went up. Farmland has its own assessment limitation, so it's adjusted for on the backside also. And like I said, if we're in the average, the taxable or the rollback is gonna eat most of that up. Nobody's gonna see a 30% increase in their taxes on farmland because of that increase. It'll be like 3% at most, because that's what the assessment limitation does. The other thing that you had commented on was how we do this without wind turbines. I don't have a personal stake in wind turbines other than like the environmental impact, because I live in a rural subdivision. There's not gonna be a wind turbine put up in my backyard and I don't have the opportunity to have one. But as the assessor, when we're challenged with these things, it's hard to not like say, well, that would be value, that takes the burden off of all of you. So obviously the best ways for you to reduce your taxes is to have lower levy rates, and that's why you're here. And again, I appreciate you guys speaking up, because so many of these meetings nobody comes to. Second of all, infrastructure is the best way to reduce your taxes, because it spreads it across more value. So a couple things, Gloria sits on the ADC board, I sit on a task force with the county and the city of Charles City. And the whole purpose of that is the trifecta. And so you have to have three things happening at once. People build houses and move into communities because of jobs and schools. So we have to have good education, we have to have schools that offer the amenities that they want. I think the school's working on that, and I also think that the state of Iowa and the Governor Reynolds is working on incentives to schools and abilities for schools to do that. The second thing is, yeah, we have a great school, but where are you gonna live? So we're working on housing development and things like that. COVID turned that world upside down, but that's definitely a good thing. But okay, so you have a house and you have a school, but we don't want you driving out of county and taking your money somewhere else. You're gonna shop in that community and all that if you live there. So we need to, have jobs here. And the jobs create, buildings and growth and employees and all this other stuff, that allows us to build more gas stations and grocery stores and all of that. So again, it's something that department heads, it's not something that we show publicly, but we're working on the backside to do this because I don't want your taxes to go up. I don't want to have to raise your value, even though I have to. But I want to be able to have a conversation with you that this is what we're doing and this is how I can show you that we're being fair and transparent and that we're helping in every way possible to reduce your tax burden, both by levy rates and then also by, bringing amenities and things in the community to make it an enjoyable place to live that you can afford to live. And that sounds a little campaign speechy, and I get that, but we really do care about it to that regard. But I know you don't have farmland, but I would be happy to show you the productivity calculations and how they come up with that. Again, it's totally out of my hands. The Department of Revenue sends me a value per acre and we take the number of acres and divide it up.
I'm in the electrical world, and so I know exactly what houses are being sold and bought, and they're not by new people, they're by landlords. So already in a rural area, you can't get farmland to build a house because nobody wants to part with that. But even in town, people can't afford to even buy a little bungalow. They're getting sucked up by, I don't want to call them all slumlords, but landlords for the sake of
Income per
PC. But yes, no one's winning.
Right.
The average person's not winning.
I think that, again, if you look at, this is outside the scope of the county government here, but like if you look at Charles City, they're gonna do a housing development out by the hospital. That is the role here, is to get more people in houses that they can, either whether they're renting or owning it, houses they can be proud to rent or own. And also, we have people living in hotels and things like that. And so we need to get those people into good housing. And so again, I think that the efforts are there.
Government subsidized housing or actual housing, because that's the next thing. All these HUD programs that benefit the landlord because they jack the rates, they buy the house, they jack from the person that should be able to buy it, but they're buying it because they know the access to all these NGOs, these non-governmental cesspools of hemorrhaging money. We need to start cutting those strings and allowing the people to act, which would lower our tax obligation,
Absolutely.
lower the need for assessed values to be where they're at. And it's just a trickle back effect.
Yeah. I would say, again, outside the scope of the county, but as far as reducing your tax burden, when businesses, regardless of what it is, come to town and they say or come to the county and they say, we'd like to do this here. Obviously, you don't necessarily always want something right next door to you. And I understand that from the person that lives right there's position, but from the whole community, it needs to just be taking a look at it to say, how does this benefit our community? And I think that we've had some missed opportunities from that, and that would definitely help us out on that side. I would also say every year we're required to report some things to the Department of Revenue from the assessor standpoint. And you guys are absolutely right. This is not a growing county and a growing community. None of rural Iowa really is. And like you said, they're moving to the urban areas because of those
To the
amenities.
southern counties, which earlier you said are just in the same boat as we don't know. Ankeny and Des Moines be connected in 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, they're going somewhere. It's not here. We don't have any opportunities. We don't have any business. We don't have any land. We don't have any. I'd like to, a task would be find out how many rental properties there are in maybe Charles City, just in North Springs alone. There's at least 2 per block. That's a bad percentage.
Yeah.
That's people that can't afford. They want to own, but there's no incentive to own it. Because why would they want to get stuck with the property taxes and everything else, the cost of living? At least now they can walk away and they don't.
Yeah, I think the fine line that the county and all the taxing authorities are treading here is, we've all given some really good examples, myself and you mostly, but good examples, and the gentleman in the corner, of why people aren't moving here, why they aren't building houses here. And I think the fine line there is that it comes to amenities. You guys have both said it yourself, but some of those amenities are police protection and fire protection. Your homeowner's insurance is higher the farther you live from your fire protection. So that's important things. We want to have safe and communities where we take care of people. We need to have daycares and schools and restaurants and shopping and all of those things. But all of that stuff costs money to do. And the taxing authorities here have the fine line where they want to incentivize growth. And in order to do that, they have to provide services or amenities. But they also don't want to tax you guys out of your homes. They don't want to make it where you have to choose between eating steak or eating ramen. I truly heartfelt believe that nobody wants that. But it's a fine line because they are required by law to provide services. They want to provide other services, and how do you create opportunities for new amenities and growth if you're not providing those services?
Because government has gotten so big because they want their hands in everything. And then that's this mandate coming down from Trump and the administration, shrink government, shrink the tax obligation, because right now, the only line we're dancing is surviving and poverty.
Absolutely.
That's the line where, and government has gotten to a point where it knows exactly where that they keep you bobbing, just grabbing enough air. Oh, made it through this tax season, made it through this winter. Come on, oh, we're just surviving. That's all we're all doing. And I make a decent living and I'm surviving.
Yep.
Barely.
Again, I think I accept the taxing authority, I kind of take this over, but, again, I would say the same for them, is that you can go through the budgets line by line, they'll show them to them. And if you guys have suggestions for like, this is what we think is fat that could be trimmed, by all means, challenge us with that.
Yeah.
I think that's the point here, is that there's been a lot of conversation about some bigger ticket items with fire protection and sheriff's office and jailers and home health care. But there's some finer line things there that, just tell us what services you think need to be trimmed.
I don't think we could all sit down here and name all the 3 or 4 letter agencies that our taxpayer money from this county go into. And even at the state level, because again, when I heard you say there's a department of something that oversees your, it's just another government agency protecting another, you all protect each other. And I'm not saying directly, but everyone's interested, because when anyone that works in the government hears less taxes, immediately like, oh, my budget's gonna be cut, we're gonna lose a person. It's like, well, that's life, that's reality. We're already too big. Something has to be, and we're talking almost in half. So when you guys,
We're gonna,
and you're the
we're
first,
gonna have to end this conversation.
and I'm almost, you guys are our only line of defense right here. That's a lot of pressure on the 3 of you to do, because you're the ambassador, you're protecting us from said they government.
I get that, but we're a little off the reason why we're here today. I think both Brandy and Lori have explained what your taxes are gonna be, not as bad as we thought.
But there should be a negative in front of it, just saying.
But they're not as bad as most people thought, and we're still trying to overcome that too, so, and we're not done working on that.
I mean, what you're saying is gonna raise that 2%. Things got thrown in the ocean, in a heartbeat over that.
Yeah.
We're a long ways away.
Does anyone else have any other comments or suggestions? If not, we're gonna, yes,
I
go
just have
ahead.
one thing to say, and, part of it's off the subject, but the school district takes a lot of the cash money in there.
Yep.
And, the thing that perturbed me the most is when they gave away that auditorium for nothing, frankly. It was $1. And then they want to spend millions of dollars building
I understand.
it. And then.
That's not in our ballpark.
The good thing I'd like to say is that our Charles City School District FFA has been named the outstanding FFA chapter in the state of Iowa. And my own namesake, my grandson, is 104 in the state that are gonna go down to Des Moines and get their Iowa farming degree.
So congratulations.
Because.
Yeah, I understand.
This Baldwin, she's John Christian.
And
So is the city gonna get any tax money back from the chicken factory that's gone belly up?
you're gonna go to them. That's the city, that's not county. We don't have anything to do with that. But I will say that, like with the old middle school, that is intended to be, you asked about low income housing. That's market rate housing, as well as one of the projects out by the hospital is market rate housing. The other project is low income housing.
One more thing, the place I live on was purchased by my grandparents in the 1800s for $37.50 an acre. And they had to pay 8% interest semi-annually. And now with the insurance, if you think taxes are bad, our payments on insurance and property tax are over $135 an acre. And 20 years ago, we'd have been hard pressed to rent probably $35 an acre.
Yep, I think we all understand that things aren't real good.
This is where inflation is derived from.
Yeah, inflation.
Right here.
Government. Thanks. We came to inform ourselves. And we will.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a motion to end the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Campbell,
Second.
second by Carr. public meetings are over. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
You want more?
Adjourn the
I don't
meeting.
mind it.
We're gonna adjourn this meeting.
What's
We
it?
have to adjourn this meeting.
You did.
Oh, you, oh, not very much. Dennis, Morgan said you just adjourned the hearing, or you closed the hearing, but you didn't adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, we were,
We have to wait for Floyd to come back
we
again.
were fortunate, they're on the right side, they always had some.
Well, two of us could do it.
But there would be projects in other townships didn't, so they have to levy debt. So now they're taking it on both sides, right, they're getting the tax dollars, they're not getting good valuation on what they're spending, because they're spending.
How you been doing? Oh, that's pretty good.
I think the max.
Got the motorcycle out?
All around. And that's where it's. Which, I
It's kind of. I know.
Right?
I haven't even started mine out yet. One of these days. Hey, Boyd,
Oh,
Boyd,
it's my pleasure.
catch him a minute. Boyd. Here. We closed the public hearing, but we didn't adjourn, so I need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Gloria, you made a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second. Well, now you adjourn, now you can go.
Okay. We're gonna go.